Hello, and welcome to Module 5, Oral and Visual Presentation Skills. For many assignments, you will be asked to provide both a visual and oral presentation. This may be a poster, a video, or a presentation using something like PowerPoint, Canva, or Prezi. The skills required to present both visually and orally are very different to academic writing. However, they still need to be ethically provided to meet Curtin's academic integrity requirements. They also need to be well informed, visually interesting and engaging, as well as clearly presented orally. Let's see how we can achieve this. Here we have an example assessment. Let's have a look. So, for this assessment, you are working in groups of 3, and you are to create an engaging e-poster using one of the following: PowerPoint, Google Slides, Canva, etc. On the topic you have been allocated, your poster must cover description of the health condition, description of the IPE team involved, reflect on the nature of the team, provide a take-home message. And that take-home message is in relation to interprofessional practice. Now, the oral presentation is required to be 6 minutes with plus or minus 10%. And each participant needs to speak for the equal amount of time. So, in your groups, you need to ask yourself and each other the following questions. First of all, what is the topic of the presentation? What part are you responsible for? How long will you speak for out of the 6 minutes? Explain what you have done so far to prepare for the presentation. And what are the main difficulties or challenges for you? You can talk about this in your group. And what do you need help with? What helps or tips can you offer other group members as well as asking for their help? Remember, this is a group presentation. You are working together. As you work together and start to develop your presentation, you need to continue to ask yourself and each other questions. For example, is the poster or the slides clearly provided? Do they contain appropriate information? Is there anything lacking? Is it too much? If you're presenting stats or figures, are the slides, is that information cited appropriately and correctly? In terms of teamwork and audience engagement, is there evidence of effective teamwork and preparation resulting in your presentation? Are the oral communication skills on demonstration suitable and clearly rehearsed? Does the presentation include appropriate techniques to involve the audience? And here we have an example of an assessment for oral presentation. Let's have a look what's being assessed and what kind of scores. Well, clearly 10% for everything. Timing's important. The health condition description, interprofessional teamwork, structure. Okay, you can see everything that's there. Citing and referencing has got to be there. Quality of the slides. How good is the group in terms of presenting? Your presenting skills. Was the audience engaged? And was the appropriate language used? And here we have an example of a poster that was built by a group a couple of years ago. And obviously this focus is dementia. Just have a look at it. Is it clear? Is the information provided appropriately? Can you engage with what's there, or are there any issues around its presentation? In my mind, there's a lot of information there, but it's appropriate. And it's quite clear as you look through and over the poster how this information is provided, and the information is appropriate to the topic. So, I don't think it's bad at all. And another example, talking about Alzheimer's. It's quite a strong poster, that black, white, and yellow. The images are very clear. It's not overburdened with text, and the information that's provided in each section is relevant and covers all the topics that I would expect to see. So again, really not a bad attempt. So, when presenting, the way that you stand, your body language, is important. What factors are important? Well, stand tall, look confident. Make eye contact with your audience, or if there's a camera, with the camera. When I present, I try to make eye contact with every member of the audience. Obviously, if there's hundreds, I can't, but I certainly make an effort to try and make eye contact with as many people as possible. Use your hands to gesture, but don't over gesture. Smile to show confidence and and what should you try to avoid doing? Well, it's best not to cross your arms or your legs, whether you're sitting or standing. Try not to fidget with anything or play with items such as a pen or your notes. Don't slouch or lean against something. And like I said before, try not to use too much gesturing. In terms of your voice, you need to speak effectively, clearly. Speak clearly and confidently. Don't rush. You don't have to speak your normal speed. I would say speak at around 80 to 90% of your normal speed. Use your mouth to create the sounds more clearly. And it's a really good idea to warm up before you start. You can do this, and I was taught this by an actor, by saying ah, e, ooh, ah, e, ooh, and stretch your mouth to create those sounds. Ah, big, wide open mouth. E, stretch laterally, and ooh, bring everything close. Do that a few times just to exercise those muscles and tendons around your jaw. Of course, visuals are very, very important, and I'm sure you've heard the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, the right picture certainly is, and it's making sure you have those right pictures, those visual aids. Now, it's also a good idea, if you can, to actually use props or artifacts, something that you can hold and move in front of the audience. I mean, to the extent where you can actually give the audience the artifact. But remember, do not overdo the animation. It gets too much. Another thing to avoid is too much text. This demonstrates that it's difficult to read through that text in a presentation. We normally say 7 lines of text, 7 words per line is the maximum. Let's now think about the openings. So, the aim of your introduction, of your opening, is to get the attention of your audience. Make sure you introduce yourself and the other group members, and introduce your presentation with a brief outline of what you and your colleagues will cover during the presentation. You can also tell the audience what your role is in this presentation. You can start with a question or a comment to make people think and pay attention. You also need to show good teamwork by creating flow and structure. Introduce each other, offer brief comments, thank yous, introductions, and conclusions to each part and, of course, the whole presentation. Of course, the language of presentations can be a lot less formal than academic writing. So, good morning and welcome. Let me introduce myself. Today, I'm going to talk about... This morning, I'd like to explain the purpose of my presentation today is to... First, I will discuss. Second, I would like to. Finally, I will concentrate on. And another way we can do this, first I will look at before moving on to, and then I'd like to talk about how this impacts upon. Okay, so these are all phrases that can be used appropriately in your presentation. And remember, your opening visual needs to grab the attention of the audience. So something like this, there's some confronting images here, but it clearly indicates what the presentation is going to focus on. And the question, did you know that chronic diseases, including diabetes, account for 3/4 of all deaths in Australia? Quite an outstanding comment to make, or a question to ask. Here we have a table with phrases for presenting information. I would recommend you to have a good look, perhaps pause the video here and look at these phrases. And here we have language of graphs and statistics. So how do we describe? Obviously going up, rose, increased, went up. Going down, decreased, fell, dropped, declined. No change, stayed the same, remained constant, stabilized. We have low points, bottoming out or reached a low, and a fluctuation. Now these concepts can be taken that much further, and again, I'll give you some time to have a look through this slide. How about this graph? You can see 2 lines, and you can see that the bottom line represents bicycle accidents in Perth, and the top line represents cold drinks sold in Perth. And we've got the horizontal axis as months of the year, so January through to December, and the number of incidents or accidents in the left-hand column. Now, interestingly, the two lines seem to correlate. But what's the reasoning behind? Is there any correlation? And if there is any correlation, what might it be? Correlation, what is the causation? What is the cause? What's the reasoning for the correlation? Have a think about it. Any ideas? Well, I'll tell you. So, in the middle of the graph is winter. Fewer people are out on their bikes, and fewer people are drinking cold drinks. But in the summer months, they go up. And in fact, what's happening is people are drinking cold drinks while they are cycling, and they're having accidents. So in fact, there is a correlation with a base causation. How about these three graphs? What is the difference? Well, it's clear what the difference is, isn't it? Chart C is very minimal, whereas chart B, there's a lot of change. However, if we think about the axes, the horizontal axes, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the vertical axis, the left-hand column, is very different. The bottom one, chart C, the range is from 0 to 100. Whereas chart B is between 20 and 28. And chart A, 0 to 30. So in chart B, in a way, they are limiting the information that's provided to show a far increased change. What appears to be a very wide range, but in effect, it's not true. So we have to be very careful, first of all, in how we present our information visually to make sure that it's authentic and does not have any kind of bias. In this case, you may want to show chart C and chart B. So there is that authentication behind the statistics that you are providing. So in your presentations, graphs can demonstrate very interesting and appropriate information visually. Now, what do? Well, you use the graph's information and provide an analysis to support a focus or a main point. It is important to make specific reference to the figures in your speech or your text. Now the figure, and I'm talking about the actual graph itself, really needs a title, and in terms of presenting information, it should really have the number as well, the number of the figure. Figure 1, figure 2, figure 3. And then you can refer to the figure by its figure number. In figure 1, or figure 1 demonstrates. And remember to cite author, year, and page number. Of course, you can present information, statistical information, through a table or a graph, or both. But you have to make the decision as to which one is most appropriate. So here we have some information. One measure of social disadvantage is relative access to primary health care. As table 1 or figure 1 shows, in comparison to capital city residents, Whoop Whoop's residents have significantly lower per capita access to both GPs and pharmacists. This suggests that governments should look at a way of encouraging more doctors and more pharmacists to move into rural areas. Okay, so that's the information that we are focusing on. But which one of these provides a more interactive or a clear way of presenting this concept and this information based on the statistics? So figure 1 obviously is a graph, and table 1 are the numbers. But which is better? What do you think? There's the graph, there's the table. Now, tables are more precise. You actually got the figures in there. It can take more work from the reader or the people involved in, or your audience, people involved in looking at the information. It takes longer to interpret. However, graphs and charts are less precise. It's difficult to see the specific figure, but easier to interpret qualitatively and by your audience members. Ultimately, which is better to use in any given circumstance depends on the presenter or the writer's objectives and who the audience or the readers are and their perceived needs. So you need to make that decision. So when you are presenting these tables or these graphs, you need to remember to tell the audience when to look at the table or the figure. Introduce the information in the table or figure. It's your role then to point out any key features or trends which you want your audience to focus on. And it's always a good idea to draw some kind of conclusion, answering that "so what?" question. So when you're concluding your section of the presentation, you need to provide a clear summary of your main points and to indicate to the audience that your part of the presentation has now finished. So the type of terminology you can use is to sum up. In conclusion, to recap the main points. And that concludes my part, and thanks for listening. Next, Hannah will discuss, and Hannah will come along. Let's think about delivery and summarize what we have discussed. Remember, the following points serve to engage or alienate, which you don't want, of course, the audience. Your voice, the pace, how quickly you're speaking, the volume, the pitch and tone, stress, and pauses are all very important elements to your oral presentation. Your body language, how you use your eyes, your hand gestures, the way that you move, if you move, even facial expressions. The language that you use, the choice of words, the grammar and sentence structure, how you punctuate what you're saying, that goes back to the pauses, how you link information together through your cohesive devices, and the discourse markers, how you set out the language and the information that you bring or provide to the audience. And of course, your visual aids, how you lay out, if the animation's there, like we said, not too much, making sure that the text is clear to read and there isn't too much information and there is consistency throughout the presentation. When required to provide a presentation, obviously practice is very important. but so is reflection and evaluation. Practice and practice and practice. You can never practice enough. I remember being told when I was a student that you should practice until it gets boring. And at that point, you're ready to present. Make sure the content that you provide refers to credible sources. Make sure you have that clear organization and overall structure. And it's your job to deliver by communicating your ideas effectively and by engaging the audience. And you've got to also think about, after the presentation, how well you achieved and what you achieved. So how well did the presentation work for the audience? Can you identify any strengths or possibly weaknesses in the presentation? Is there anything that you would change about the presentation? And you can always give yourself a score and make a list of things that you need to work on for next time. As you have seen, there are many elements needed to make a quality presentation, both visually and orally. To create a quality presentation, you need time. And if you are working in a group, work together efficiently and supportively. Good luck!